Have you heard of the term model minority?
Model minority is the it's
A model minority.
oh, honestly nothing.
It's kind of the illusion that a certain minority is performing well by working hard and like doing the right thing to do in America.
It's like maybe like a well-behaved minority, the way that minorities should act. No?
My name is Stephen Pu. I'm an international student and I go to Germantown Friends School in Philadelphia. I've been in the States for 2 years, and originally I'm from Beijing, China. Funny thing was, when I first came here, every time I run into an Asian-looking person, I wanted to speak Chinese to them. And I think that was because back home, I was the majority, and every time you see somebody that looks Chinese or Asian, you assume that they are of the same origin as you do, but actually that's not the case.
I was actually born in Salt Lake City when my parents came. I would like to think I know a lot about Korean culture. Since my mom doesn't speak very much English, my dad, he speaks half Korean, half English to me. But when I would go home after school, all I would say is hi, bye, how was school? I would be like, oh, it was okay, all in Korean, but just very simple things. And especially once we moved to New Jersey, there wasn't a big Korean community. It was just where I lived is a very affluent white community, so you know, not that many people know about Korean culture, and even if they are Korean, they don't speak Korean.
David is the guy that I met during a summer program at Tsinghua University. I was working with a program called Experiencing China. We started talking about the questions that I've had living in the States for a year. We engaged a lot of deep conversation about identity and his experiences growing up, which sometimes I can relate to living in the States.
The moment I felt separated from the Korean culture, or I was having this clash between am I an American or am I a Korean, was probably when I moved to New Jersey. So I was like one of maybe another Asian kid, and that was just me. And I was like, in class, they would be like making Asian jokes, so I was like constantly confused. They're like, what, like, I mean, it was just really hard growing up that way. And at one point, I was just like, I don't want to be Korean anymore. I want to be an American. I want to be white, just like my friends.
I am half Cambodian. My father is a refugee from Cambodia from the 1970s around that time, and my mother is half black, half white. Even though I am part black and part Asian, I feel that I identify more with my Asian side because it's also what people first see in me when they see me. Being a part of two cultures has definitely influenced how I look at certain situations. My values reflect both American culture and Asian culture as well, I think, and I also think that I have a different entitlement than what my father had growing up as a child. I'm definitely privileged in that sense. I feel like certain things that I worry about are not the same things that my dad worried about as a child.
I'm Argentine American. My parents moved from Argentina about 30 years ago. I was born and raised in New York City, particularly in Harlem. I went to public high school in Harlem, mostly black and brown, so Hispanic community. It was weird. Not weird, I guess everyone in New York is an immigrant. You know, like that's the whole thing about New York, is that everyone comes from somewhere else. And being a New Yorker to me is being raised there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I feel American. So growing up in Harlem where everyone else is like that, like it kind of feels like this like weird home where like people understand me, and I didn't realize that there was something for them to understand until I left that area and was finally with people who are like Americans. And by Americans I mean like many generations back, and I was like, wow, what I grew up with is not the norm. When we talk about history or social studies, it's rarely ever in reference to Asian culture and society. So most of it's just from like friends of mine or reading like books I read, like the Joy Luck Club or Memoirs of a Geisha. So it combines this like stereotypical identity, and unfortunately it also groups a lot of Asia, at least Northern and Eastern Asia, into this nucleus.
Colorism is the idea of privileging light-skinned people, this concept of discrimination based on skin color, and the attached social meanings to the color of your skin. Together, we are all beautiful. We are all worth it. The color of your skin does not define you. In fact, let me remind you, equality, liberty, together we all deserve it.
After knowing some of the situation about the Asian community in the States, I decided to know more about it. And around a year and a half ago, I decided to join a program called Aspire. It is a student-led program at the University of Pennsylvania.
Here's like an interesting article, like Asian American men in romantic dating markets. So like, even if like you're rich and like you have high status, like they're not socially accepted for like partners. So in a research study, they compared to like Asian men dating and compared to like all
growing up, it was a little weird for me because I went to a predominantly white school, and I was like usually the only Asian one there, and like there would be like a lot of racism and things that I have to deal with. And the thing about that was that I always felt alone, and I couldn't be around people that sort of looked like me and could sort of relate to me. I heard about Aspire like through friends, and they told me about their experiences, and I figured that I needed to go to a program to like educate myself more about my heritage.
This is my third year in Aspire. So I've been involved in Aspire since I was a freshman. So freshman year, I was a facilitator. And sophomore year, I was co-chair curriculum. And so this year, I'm chair. I definitely hope to achieve, I think with Aspire, a community, basically. So even though Aspire is like a mentorship program, we talk a lot about kind of issues of identity and issues like relating to the Asian American Pacific Islander community, and really having open-ended discussions and learning from each other through this program. But I think like the most important goal is to foster a community that people can feel safe in a space where everyone is able to really like share their experiences and learn from each other.
It kind of opened my eyes again because when like I'm in America, and like so there's so many like comments that people throw at you, and like you get used to it and you don't really notice it until like somebody actually presents it and put it right in front of you and say, oh wow, this is actually wrong. I mean, I didn't really think about it like that. Most like comments I get, good or bad, I like, you know, it goes to the back of my mind. I don't really think about it, and then being an Aspire just brought it back up.
I came to the United States at age 15, having grown up in Hong Kong, and I have lived here for the past 19 years. I gained American citizenship last year. Currently work at Germantown Friends School. I'm a history teacher here. My elder brother actually went to a boarding school, another boarding school in Massachusetts, and I was interested, so I tried going to a summer school at Phillips Andover, and I really enjoyed it. And so after that, I applied for regular school and got in, and I attended for 3 years. There are a lot of small cultural things that made it challenging for the first 2 years of my experience. So anything like kind of the way people speak, the like sarcasm of people's jokes, different view on world affairs and perspectives. Both, I mean, like in terms of people not really knowing much about Hong Kong, and people really like knowing quite a bit. All of those things, I think, got some getting used to, because in Hong Kong, I was in the majority, racially, ethnically, and coming to the United States, I was not, but linguistically I was still in the majority.
Throughout middle school, but also ninth grade in particular, people start to form around other people who have similar passions or interests as them, but sometimes race also subconsciously, they form groups around race as well. Yes, there has been times where I tried to change my personality and some of my interests to fit in more with those. And I remember when I was in elementary school as well, just coming to school with actual noodles and chopsticks, people thinking it's ramen, but it's actually like legitimate noodles. You know, people giving the side eye, and I remember after that, I went to buy lunch instead. I didn't bring my own lunch because I didn't want to have to go through that hassle of like, oh, what type of noodles is that?
I have an ex-boyfriend of mine who was Chinese American, raised in outside of Boston. So definitely like a lot more exposure through that and hearing more about what his upbringing was like. And it was cool to see the like intersections of my upbringing from immigrant parents and his upbringing. Of course, main difference being that I pass as American. Like I don't receive the same outward reception when just walking down the street.
This trend of students from mainland China coming to study in independent schools in the United States has been accelerating over the past 2 decades, and I think that it's really good, like for the schools. Like it really gives a new dimension to the word diversity. Like diversity in this country, most people think of when they hear that word, they think of race, but it's so much more than that. And having students from mainland China come in with their experiences and just sharing their stories really enriches everybody. Okay, it enriches them, it enriches the other students' experiences, and enriches our experiences as teachers, because we get to teach such a dynamic overall class when you have people from different countries coming together.
Shedding more light on this idea of universal.
When it comes to education, it was just very interesting for me to compare those little details between the American elite education and the Chinese public schools.
In China, definitely, it's more of remembering, taking tests, writing down your answers. But I think there are actually a lot of workshops, being held during the school years, in different classes. And then I think the school has a lot of courses that sort of promote the ability to sort of speaking out your ideas and critical thinking. And by the way, I'm also from a public school, so I think changes are definitely floating around.
I think an elite education really, at the end of the day, is an education that makes everybody hopeful for the impact that they can make on this world in a positive setting.
So code switching, definitely for mixed people, for multiracial background people, it's very prevalent. I do feel that I do kind of hide certain things and who I am at home when I'm at school, and when I'm with my Cambodian family, I tend to also hide certain things, and to a certain extent, like code switching is okay, but when you're switching your values for certain people, then that's when it becomes an issue.
One of my purposes is to get more people in the Asian community to realize that this is actually a big issue. When they're being offended, they need to stand up and educate other people to let them know that what they're doing is offensive, or otherwise they're just gonna keep doing it. Back home, like when you are the majority and you've been hearing like all those sayings about, hey, like he's Korean, he's Japanese, like how different you are. But after coming here, I just realized, like we aren't that much different, because like we are all representing the same community. And while like after attending the program and then just my personal experiences, I sensed so many like little issues and strugglings. I feel like doing something for the community is doing something for, for the world.
I mean, I think I'll just try to be more like conscious about like what I hear, like correcting people if it's something like over the line. But I just feel like it feels good to be an Asian. Like it's just there's nothing wrong with it.
I think about my identity as an Asian American in a predominantly white country. I think about identity as someone of Chinese descent and how, in some ways, I'm modeling the experience for students of Chinese descent and Asian descent more generally as well. After I got married and had a kid, I think about like how important it is to have conversations about identity with my daughter.
Even though I'm partial of many different things, that I look at myself as being 100% of all those things. So I think that is the identity that I embrace, the identity that is built up of many different identities. And that's kind of what I've embraced or learned to embrace as I've gotten older.
I actually want to relearn the Korean that I've forgotten. And I think one of the problems with me growing up in just a white community was that I haven't really been experienced Korean culture, although I was taught it. I just feel very disassociated with it, especially when it comes to, let's say, the Korean style or Korean music. That's just something I'm not very interested in, and I kind of feel like I'm missing out, and that's a big part of Korean culture today. So I really want to continue to learn about, Korean culture and things like that.
It's definitely for all the international students to represent themselves how they like the way they want to and value their culture, because I don't think if you guys know this, but actually right now China is pretty westernized. And I think as international students here, I think it's really important for us and also many people to value their root culture, because I think in the end that's really what's important.
A lot of Asian students.
In showing this documentary to more people, in some way I'm carrying out a message to a broader audience, not just in the Asian community, but in other ethnic groups. Because a lot of times people assume when they do not understand certain issues. So in making this movie and showing this movie to other people, I hope to let more people outside of the Asian community to know that there are actually so many issues and so many strugglings. And I hope people, specifically from other ethnic groups, to respect different cultures and to respect individuals as well. After all, the term model minority is just another stereotype.
When you think of like an Asian in America, you think like they're doing well for themselves, but like that's a very small group of Asians. There's also like the nail salon workers. There's like a lot of people who are actually still struggling in America, who are like part of that minority that is like supposed to be like doing really well for themselves.
I definitely think that exposure to other identity groups, especially those very outside of your own, exposure to these upbringings, to these different cultures, these practices, traditions, whatever it means to be an other, is so important. Being exposed to different identities and religions and cultures and ethnicities has taught me that what I know is not what I know, is not what is known. So it might be what I think I know, but I constantly have to relearn. And, growing up and being open-minded, you have to be in this process of relearning, acknowledging your unconscious biases. And so I think if people had more exposure, especially in the US, you could finally recognize people for who they are and where they come from and what it means to come from a certain place.